What's so cool about Rollei Retro ADS? Let's see. I wanted to do some more film comparisons to Tri-X like I began earlier in the year. But to keep things consistent, rather than do them every now and then, I went ahead and got 49 different film stocks. Everything I could get in 35mm from B&H and Freestyle. So unless they were out of stock, I got a roll of it. Now, if this part of the video seems familiar, it's because I'm using this portion of the video for all 49 of them rather than record it 49 times. So if you want to skip ahead to the H&D curves or the prints, time codes are right over here. For those of you that haven't seen this part of the video before, here's what I've done. So I wanted to use each film with the exact same shot, which is a headshot of me with a Kodak Gray Card Plus, which happens to have a red, blue, and green patch, a cyan, magenta, yellow patch, and then a dark and a neutral flesh tone. Then, with those shots taken, I bracketed every shot in third of a stop so that we can make sure we have a negative of equal shadow density to the base target film of Tri-X. Now, the reason I use Tri-X is because it's just been around for a long time and it's a very popular film. So it's a good base film to compare everything to. Then, once everything was developed, which was developed in D-76 at stock for the manufacturer's recommended time, I printed everything on Ilford using the exact same aperture, contrast settings, developer, and everything. The only thing I changed was my exposure time, and that was to make sure that I compensated for any base fog variation from one film stock to another. Other than that, everything was left the same so that we can have a comparison of just the qualities of the film. Now, there's going to be some differences in contrast, especially on the high end, and that's because the manufacturers getting their development time may not have used the same target that Kodak used for Tri-X. And that's okay. We're not looking at the overall contrast for everything. What we're really looking at is grain characteristics, tonality, how the film treats the shadows versus the highlights, that sort of thing. And we're looking at spectral sensitivity, thus the Gray Card Plus, rather than just a regular Gray Card. So we're going to go ahead and look at H&D curves, which if you saw one of my earlier videos on sensitometry, I like to use pen and paper and make my graphs. However, my wife was really ready to make sure I was done with this project. So she put everything into a spreadsheet for you all. So even though I don't like them, I want to show them to you thanks to her. Then we're going to go ahead and look at the prints side by side with the same print made from Tri-X. And from there, you can decide if you like the film and if you want to go and use it. So let's go ahead and take a look at the curves, and then we'll go to the prints. Tri-X in the blue, Rollei Retro 80 in the red. So we've got the typical smooth toe that then raises up into our midtones, but then we have a shoulder that begins in our upper midtones and just has a slow, smooth arc to quite a bit of flattening up in the high tones. Quite a dramatic curve there. So let's see what the prints look like and if we can actually see any separation in those values. All right, here we have our Rollei Retro 80 and our Kodak Tri-X. Before we begin, I do want to say I realize I am not pronouncing Rollei in the correct German. I don't speak German. So I apologize to those that have to listen to me say it incorrectly. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. Okay, now at the film itself, it is pretty contrasty. I feel like this is going to be a theme with the Rollei films. The other ones I've looked at also exhibit this sort of punchiness. We are developed correctly if you look at the whites. But the curves are a little strange in that we have good blacks, we have matching whites, but then our midtones tend to drop a little bit compared to the Kodak. We don't have quite the shadow separation, which is why we kind of have a dark background here as opposed to a light here, because our midtones are separating different. Again, we have a lighter medium gray than here, with our highlights being the same. That's just a feature of the film. So I feel like your mid to lower tones are going to blend together more than the upper tones. Now, when it comes to the lightness here in my skin, we can see that we have an extended red sort of spectrum response and a lower cyan. So we do have a little bit darker t-shirt, which is a cyan color, versus over on that side. And then we do have a little bit of a drop in our green and blue. Okay, so that's on the large scale. Let's go ahead and look at the close-up. I will say, however, before we go down there, that this is marked as an 80 speed film, but I'm actually getting 64, so a third of a stop slower than advertised. All right, let's zoom in and look at the grain structure and sharpness. All right, here we are up close, and we can see the background grain is actually pretty fine compared to Tri-X. So nice fine grain structure. We are getting good sharpness in the detail around my shaded side of the eye, down in the shadows underneath. And you can see the little wispies of my hair coming out nice and sharp. Down here on the shaded shoulder, we can see the edge of the fabric silhouetted against the background. So we are getting nice little detail in some of those fuzzies on the shoulder. We are getting a good sense of the grain in the smooth background section. Very fine grain, which is good because we've seen some films in this speed range which definitely had much larger grain. So Rollei coming in with pretty good small grain structure, which is awesome. Here on the lighted side of my portrait, we've got really fantastic sharpness with the collar of my shirt. The ribbing there is really sharp in those lines. The stitching on my shoulder is nice and sharp. And quite frankly, I'm picking up in here some of the actual weave of the shirt. Now, I've seen this before in the Rollei 25. If you missed that video or I haven't published it yet, spoiler alert there, as well as some of the high resolution copy films that have been repackaged for general use. This is the first time that I've seen it in a film this fast relative to the others. So being a 64-80 speed, I would expect it to be blurred, or rather just not quite as high resolution, but this is coming in very, very sharp. So that is really quite impressive. I realize with the retro name that they're going for that old school retro film feel. I don't really see that in any of this. I'm just getting a red extended spectrum, which we've seen with other Rollei films. We've seen with Across 2 and some Ilford films, FOMA and whatever. But I've not seen the combination of high resolution, the extended red, and starting to get into a slightly faster speed. The high resolution and red extended we saw with the 25, but that one being at a 16 speed, much, much slower. All right, here in my face, as we've seen before, we are getting the lightening and smoothing of the red in my skin. We're getting the darkening of the blue of my eye, and it creates a higher contrast portrait, for me anyway, being Caucasian with blue eyes. But we are getting nice detail, nice sharpness, all those things that we've seen with other films. It's a good film. Third of a stop slower than advertised, but that's not a deal breaker if you're looking for something in this speed range. Overall, I think if you shoot this film, you'll be very, very happy. All right, that's going to do it for this film. Thank you for watching. If you would like to help support this channel, you can go to my Patreon page or my merchandise page down in the bottom in the description. Until next time, thanks again.